All right, next question. Should I know more about investments for my job? Maybe. But I think everybody we talked about it just a hair ago, but I mean, everybody should have a basic knowledge just so that stocks, bonds, money markets, just some basic stuff so that you know what questions to ask and you understand those conversations. But if you don't understand those conversations, then ask, because that's the only way you're going to. And so I think that's important, is just feel empowered to ask those questions, because it's important that you understand. And I am happy. This is truly a topic and a subject that I just find really important. I feel like it is important that as ladies we get this, and so reach out. I am happy to share with you whatever you want to know. I will bore you to death if you allow it, but I am happy to help with that. Go ahead.
Over the long term of your relationship with your advisor, there is a piece of this relationship that is education, right? And that's part of the value we provide is a resource for you to come to and be like, hey, what is this mutual fund I own in this? That's part of it, is we should be explaining that to you and making sure you're comfortable with that. And I think that's one of the pieces that over time, when you pick your advisor and as that relationship, deepens, is you ought to be able to be like, okay, look, I want to understand this better. So, I can feel more comfortable about what these are. And, because a lot of times we're going to make a recommendation, and the more educated a client is on those, the more involved they can be in that conversation, which deepens that relationship, builds trust, all of those things. It's good for everybody.
And the more comfortable they're going to be if they understand it, right? Like, that's what we want. We want you to sleep at night. We don't want you to worry about this. So we're going to go over some basic 101 investing just to kind of cover that topic. Yep. So what is investing? Investing is giving money to another entity with the hope that it will return more in the future. Okay, that's it. It may be a bank, it may be a mutual fund, it may be a stock, it could be all kinds of things. It could be a bond.
Could be a treasury.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a plethora of options. It could be a house.
So many things, yeah. Real estate, yeah. It could be everything, all kinds of stuff.
And why do people choose to invest?
Inflation,
right? So what our money's worth today, it's not going to be worth tomorrow, it's not going to be worth next year, and so on down the road. And so just to keep up with our current standard of living, we've got to keep up with inflation. And so the easiest way to do that is through investing.
Yeah, and we're going to say the easiest way to do that is investing, is because you're talking about your money compounding over time. You talk about 20, 30, 40 years worth of compounding can do incredible things. The eighth wonder of the world, I believe Albert Einstein called it, is compounding, and that it just has an incredible effect on your investment over long-term investing.
Okay, so then we're just going to go super basics. Stock, if you buy a stock, you are earning a piece of a share, or a share, which is a piece of a company, right? So you have a little or big, depending on how much you have, piece of that company. And then they are going to pay you dividends, which are just small payments. As they make money, then they're going to give you a portion of that. You want to say something?
No.
Okay. Bonds, you're basically loaning your money to a company to use it to do whatever, build roads or whatever it is they want to do. And then for allowing you to do that, they're going to pay you interest. Just like when you pay loan interest. It's the same idea.
Yeah,
it's just a bond. A mutual fund is when you pool your money with other investors and you purchase a group of stocks or bonds, or a mixture, depending on what the fund looks like. And that way you're able to invest in a bunch of different companies with lower, it wouldn't be so easy to invest in Amazon because It's, I think, around $3,000 a share right now. And so, although I did just date us, you know, you may not have that, but if you have $1,000, you can have a portion that may be in Amazon if it's in that mutual fund. Index funds are, they're not going to use, they're like a mutual fund, but they're not going to use a professional manager that's going to actively change, because in a mutual fund, they will trade those stocks actively. In an index fund, they're going to basically just try and track the index. So
going to mirror the index. So like if you got the S&P 500, you buy an S&P 500 index fund, it's going to try and match that as closely as it possibly can.
And then ETFs, or exchange traded funds, are just index funds that are going to trade throughout the day. So they are time sensitive, just like a stock. Because a mutual fund, it's one price at the end of the day. It's the same for everybody. But with an ETF, you can trade them throughout the day like you would a stock. And then real estate, there are 4 categories: commercial, residential, industrial, and land. And you would just either buy that and hope that it appreciates over time, or you buy it and you rent it and you make money that way. There's all kinds of things you can do with real estate. But those are kind of your basics and the areas of investing. So get comfortable there first, and then we'll go a little deeper.
Yeah, and they get much more complicated.
It can.
You know, this is a very general 35,000 foot description of what these are, because inside each one of those investment types, there's so many details inside of there that, you know, you may or may not want to know. You may just want to know, oh, okay, a stock is, you know, I'm buying, you know, into the equity of a company, and you don't care about anything below that, you know, share class and, you know, all of the other things that come along with that. They get
getting deep, right?
Yeah, it gets. The whole time I was like, don't talk about that to myself. I just kept saying, oh, I want to say something about share class. No, don't say anything about that. Okay, Brett, don't say anything about different mutual, the scope of a mutual fund or the scope of an ETF, about how, you know, a lot of them are very specific in the area. I was like, don't talk about that. Don't talk about, sectors. That's what I was trying to think of a sector.
Yeah, well, but you might want to know that.
Yeah, some people will, some people won't.
And that's okay if you don't. But trust that as an advisor, if you need to know it, we're absolutely going to tell you that. Yeah. I tend to tell people things that they probably don't want to know, but I feel like it's relevant.
And diversification is super important. I mean, we're not even getting into that at all. Talking about, you know, depending upon what your risk tolerance is,
which we have a test for. Your
timeline for retirement or whatever your goal is, right? Whether you're 5 years from it or 50 years, completely changes how your investment makeup is going to change.
Your income can affect it. I mean, all kinds of things can affect your risk tolerance. But the good news is there are allocation recommendations for every risk tolerance on the board. And so you take a 6-question test. There's no wrong answer, which is great, right? And then from that, it spits us out a number, and then we know where we need to keep you within so that you are able to sleep at night.
Yep. 100%. That's it.
Grand finale.
Yeah, the grand.
So, not that I didn't love everyone's question, but I will say this was my favorite because I felt challenged so much by this question, and I don't know. I like a challenge, I guess. So the question is, how do we close the income gap between women and men? And my first thought, I'll be honest, was, well, if I had that answer, it wouldn't exist.
Or you'd be a very rich woman.
Well, but then, I didn't like that answer. And so I did a little research, and we are actually posting a blog post later in the month that does this, and it's really good. And I, honestly, after I read it, I was like, I'm gonna go change the world. I felt really good after I read it, which made me want to do more with this as well. So I won't do the article justice, I'm sure, but I do want to touch on it just to give you a sneak peek and then keep your eyes open for it, because I think it really, at least for me, I thought it was great. Women tend to gravitate toward being cash heavy and not taking risks. Okay, so that's just by nature. It's not right or wrong, it's reality. And so that's just how it is. So I can tell you that personally I see this in my house, because growing up, you know, I was pretty timid and we didn't destroy our house. I don't have daughters, I have 2 sons. And they are nuts. Like, they want to wrestle, and being injured doesn't even cross their minds when they're playing. And that, I feel like when I was a kid, I was always scared, you know, of a lot of things because I didn't want to get hurt. They don't even think about it. So I think there's just a difference. And so it just was kind of funny to me, because I'm like, well, that's right. I mean, it's risk, right? It's not financial risk, but it is risk. And my husband the same way. Like, sometimes when he talks about things that he did as a kid, I'm like, yeah, that never would have crossed my mind. So that's just, it just kind of resonated. And I think too, TV and movies don't really help, because they don't ever depict, or at least not that I can think of, strong females on Wall Street.
You mean you want a female Wolf of Wall Street? So.
No, I don't. But even on that, think about it. Like, there's no woman in that movie either that's like, that's not the role that they play.
Right.
And so
that's not how they're portrayed.
Right. Exactly. And so I think that so I think TV and movie tells us we're not supposed to be that way either, right? That's not our place or whatever. And so, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying that's what we're fed. And we talked about this, women make less, so that's only going to add to that gap. And women also tend to stay in jobs that they don't want, and in relationships that aren't necessarily ideal, which is going to continue to widen that gap. Some of that may be because they've stayed home to watch their children, so they're not able to move up as quickly, or they are caring for elderly parents, so they're not able to move up as quickly. So there are lots of reasons why.
Yeah, or sometimes because of those 2 things, they've chosen not to take on more responsibility, you know, or they may say, hey, I pass up on a promotion because they're like, my priority is taking care of my children, taking care of an elderly person.
And that's okay. There's
totally
not anything wrong with that.
That's just that figures into these calculations. So, you know, a lot of times I think that, you know, it's kind of generalized, right? And we want to make sure people understand all of those things are okay. What we need to figure out is, how do we educate women so they close that gap? Right? So they understand investments, so they participate more, so then that they can create their own retirement accounts and have all these financial goals for themselves, you know, to create their own independent financial security that takes them into retirement, or whatever that financial goal is, helping give them those pieces so they can do that.
Right. So a single man's income on average is 3 times that of a woman. And so some of those reasons are pay inequality. Now, pay inequality could be for a plethora of reasons. It may just be because she didn't ask for a raise. I mean, that was one thing that I think my dad beat into my head early on, was you are worth more. Like, you just always want to make sure that you understand, like, you can ask for more money. Like, you work your tail off, and, you know, don't be afraid to do that. Like, that's not a bad thing to say, you know, I want compensated for the work I do. And I think by nature we're not designed that way. And so I don't know, having that push probably has helped me.
And we're going to talk about this more in depth in a second, but not talking about how much money people make. I mean, I think if you think about people you're closest to, you probably have an idea how much money they make, but you don't know what their salary is. Because over time it's been created. You don't talk about that. You don't get in people's financial business. But I think that that's what creates all these inequalities then, is because people aren't talking.
Guys do way more than girls.
Guys will more, but even I'm going to say I've got friends I've had since high school. Well, we don't talk about it. I mean, now the ones that are clients we have, but the guys that aren't clients, it's, you want to start talking about that, people get a little hem-haw dancing around it, because there's always this,
well, it's taboo.
There's a fear that, I'm going to throw out a number that's either going to be significantly more than the person I'm talking to or significantly less, right? And you're like, you don't want to make them feel bad if it's more, and then you don't want to feel bad if it's less. Because they've just created all this taboo around it. Whereas opposed to just saying, that's just the deal I've negotiated with my employer,
right,
which is totally fine.
Right.
It is what it is. If you say that and then you feel, why is mine so much lower? If two people are doing the same job and one is significantly lower than the other one, then it's, the same skills. There's all these things that go into it. Experience, skills, blah, 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 all these things. Better negotiation tactics, all of these things. But I think removing the silos of people not talking about it, I think is huge for people to move forward in a financial, I'll say, sense that you just talk about it more. We help educate each other. We teach each other about options that are out there, opportunities that are out there, and investments that are out there.
Right. Okay, going back to why we've got an income difference. And we've talked about it, but I just want to kind of get back on that track.
Yep.
So again, women put those careers on hold to care for children and elderly parents. So those pay inequality and then those things are all causing that gap. So how do we close it?
How do we close it?
This is the meat and potatoes of the day. Stop shying away from Wall Street and learn how to invest. So get that basic knowledge in place, call those professionals in your life, and figure out what you don't know, and let us help you along the way so that you are empowered and feel strong and confident in those decisions that you make. Because ideally, that's where we want this to go, right? Like, you want to walk out of those appointments and feel like, I feel so much better now. That's 100% what every single person in this office wants. Become more knowledgeable about investing and the risk assessment, which should give you more tolerance for risk, really. The more you learn about risk, the more comfortable you're going to be with it. Because, at least in my opinion, I'm not saying the stock market's going to go up every single day of the year for the rest of my life, but over time, it has historically shown that it is on the rise. And so that would tell you, now I'm not saying necessarily for everyone, but the younger you are, more than likely the more aggressive you should be for your tolerance. Now, you may not be an aggressive person by nature, so it just may be the most aggressive you are in your life, but you have time on your side, right? So it's just learning more about that topic and the market makes it less scary, because the more you know, like, I didn't know that was historically what happened before, but now that I've been in the field, a lot of things make a lot more sense to me.
I was going to touch on this a second ago. Andrea and I have been in the financial services industry about the exact same amount of time, and I think our experience has been similar, that as we've learned more and more about these investments, like you were just getting ready to say, you become more comfortable with them, and you're like, oh, so I understand if I'm going to be in this for investing for 20 years, the chance that it's going to go up over 20 years is very, very high. That percentage that it's going to go up over 20 years is very high. As far as the probability.
The more aggressive I am, the more I'm going to be able to absorb of that. So that's where I've pushed myself.
And as you said,
not that that's for everyone, but I think you definitely become more comfortable with it the more you know.
Yeah, as you become educated and you understand what's in an ETF, what's in a mutual fund, stocks, the return on fixed income. Once you start understanding those things, you're like, oh yeah, I personally feel more comfortable being more aggressive in my investments. I personally do.
Yeah. Then we need to just ignore a lot of the media that's out there, because if you think about it, like women's ads are focused on like purses and shoes and like stuff, right? It's just all stuff. But like men's ads will talk about like basically it shows like a financially successful man as being like you've made it, but it doesn't do that with women. Like our ads are just kind of focused differently, and so just ignore it. Who's to say that you shouldn't invest? Who's to say that you shouldn't know about stocks and bonds and learn it. It's great.
You know what'll help you ignore them? A plan. Having a plan, knowing what your investments are, understanding your timeline, your risk tolerance, your appetite for risk, all of those things come from a plan. Understanding you set the goals, you set the priorities, together we create the plan. Once you start following that plan, then you're like, hey, I've created a line in my budget to where I'm saving for these things. So then you eliminate the impulse buying. You then aren't as drawn to the advertisements because you say, well, I have a plan, and this is how I address those issues.
Well, you see the bigger picture, right?
Bigger picture. Your priority is that financial goal. Retirement, college education, goals, whatever those goals are. That's your focus.
Right. Personally, I can say that I relate to that one a lot. Like that has changed since I put a plan in place. Like stuff
that absolutely.
I used to do, like I just don't even care about now, which is good. And then what Brett talk about money. We've always been taught not to. Yep. And that's a lot of why we're uncomfortable talking about it.
What the three things you're not supposed to talk about? Money, politics, and religion, right? That's what I grew up being told that.
Yeah.
Right? You don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about money because they lead to fights. They lead to hurt feelings.
Which I don't know why money would lead to fighting, but because I'm not saying you have to like run into the room and be like, I make this amount, what do you make? Like that's not what it needs to be, but we can talk about investments. Like absolutely.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to specifically be about your salary.
Right.
But let's talk about investments and what you're invested in and help educate your circle. Lift your whole circle of people up together, right? The people that are important to you, right? Educate them.
Right. We tend to internalize financial concerns instead of sharing them. So same topic, like talking about those things. What do you worry about? This is kind of what this survey was. Like, what scares you? Being able to recognize the things that scare you so that you can make them not scare you anymore. So really just being able to talk about it, bring it to the surface, and then that's going to allow you to get past those. I think because, again, the more we understand, the more empowered we're going to feel. All right, well, I know this has been super long, but I am so glad that we did it because I love this. So hopefully you at least learned one thing. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. I know anyone in this office would be happy to help you. So I don't know. Anything else?
We're going to put Andrea's contact information at the end of this video. We'll have her phone number and email address and that stuff. And if you have a related financial question that you want to pose to Andrea, she'd love the opportunity to help you find the answer for whatever the question is you have. We'll also have our contact information for all of our social media and everything on the slide after this. Feel free to reach out to us, follow us on social media, like, comment, let's start the conversation.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's remove some of this taboo-ness around it, and let's talk about, what our investments, and if you get to the point you want help with the budget, you want help with a plan, whatever that is, whatever you want to get moving on to, reach out to us. We'd love to sit down and talk to you about it. Once again, Brett Rice, Core Vision Financial Group, joined today by Andrea Lee, also from Core Vision Financial Group. Thanks for watching the video.